I'd like to give you the challenge right now to try to think of how many industries you can name that have not been affected by the internet or the World Wide Web in the last 20 years. Think about that for the next few weeks and see if you come up with any. Okay, the same thing's happening with blockchain technology. And one of our later speakers later this morning, Nancy Amert from CGI, is going to talk a little bit more about how coalitions and consortia in various different industries are working together to come up with standards and best practices for leveraging in blockchain in those industries. Already, these groups have come up with hundreds and hundreds of use cases. You can see dozens just in the financial services area right now. Already, PNC has got at least half a dozen proofs of concept underway in various different areas. There are many others in financial services and many others across all other industries. One of the things that it's going to be very important for those of you who are in contact on a regular basis with your clients to understand is not only how blockchain will change the way in which PNC can deliver its services better and more cost-effectively, faster and more efficiently to them as customers, but just as it's important, especially if these are customers with whom you may be having lines of credit, holding deposits, processing transactions, you need to understand their business. And part of what you need to understand about their business is how their business is going to be changed over the next few years as a result of blockchain technology. In many cases, you may be the ones who are going to need to educate and handhold your customers to assist them through that transition. So I don't want you to put your blinders on and say, as long as we understand how blockchain is going to affect PNC, we don't need to know anything else about it. You'll need to know how it addresses all your customers in all your industries. Well, you can't talk about blockchain, of course, without talking about digital currencies. I've already mentioned Bitcoin, and in fact, there are literally thousands of digital currencies out there. Now, from a practical perspective, the value of those digital currencies is concentrated in a couple of dozen. About 99% of the value of all the digital currencies in the world is concentrated in a couple of dozen, and about 50% is concentrated in the largest 3 or 4. But just as 20 years ago, where the smart people were asking, how do I use the internet and the World Wide Web to manage my business more effectively? There were still people at that point were saying, how can I figure out which internet stocks to buy so I can get rich quick? A lot of people look at Bitcoin, digital currencies, and blockchain as an opportunity to get rich quick, and certainly some people have managed to succeed in getting very rich in relatively short periods of time. That's really what it's not what it's about fundamentally. But at the same time, we don't want to ignore, as some people have referred to it, the elephant in the room, in the sense of not being aware and understanding what these technologies are about and what digital currencies are about. For the most part, it's about investment in them as assets. There's not yet much being done in the way of using them for routine payments. As speed, scalability, and interoperability improve with the emergence and evolution of blockchain technologies, I believe we will see digital currencies become a fourth method of accepted payment settlement in much the same way as during a period of 10 or 15 years from the 70s on through the early 90s, we saw this new form of payment called debit and credit cards. You know, now for those of you who are millennials, you're probably saying, well, haven't debit and credit cards existed since the dawn of time, or at least the invention of plastic? But those of us who are old enough to recall, I remember my dad saying, a man pays his bills in hard cash or a check drawn on a good bank. None of this plastic stuff. It was another 4 or 5 years after he said that before he had credit cards. But the point being that we will see that come along, in my opinion, over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. Our world has changed a lot in the just over a decade or so now since the first smartphones came out. You ain't seen nothing yet. We're going to see more change in the next 10 years than we have seen in the last 50. How are you going to accommodate all that change? In order to do that, it starts by changing your mindset. You've got to recognize that change is your friend. It's not simply enough to be willing to accept change that's imposed from outside, you've got to willingly seek out opportunities for change. Not just change for change's sake, but change so that you can leverage these new technologies as enablers to then change the way your key business processes work. Even change, in many cases, your fundamental business model. I was asked recently at a presentation, is blockchain going to disintermediate a lot of companies? I said, blockchain is going to disintermediate a lot of functions. If the only thing a company does is to provide that function, they better seriously start thinking about a new direction pretty soon. Other companies that may participate in providing that function are going to have to think about how to reallocate their resources so that their business model is going to fit better in the blockchain-enabled business ecosystem, which will also have to be changed. Mind, processes, business models, entire business ecosystems. That's a lot of change. But as the famed historian Henry Steele Commager put so well over a century ago, change does not necessarily assure progress. But progress implacably requires change.